I think it's safe to say at this point that the Star Wars franchise is a little bit of a mixed bag, at least in terms of quality. You've got the original 3 Star Wars movies, which are absolute masterpieces. Simple stories with pretty obvious influences, but being told masterfully, with wonderful acting performances, special effects that still hold up to this day, and industry-defining music that elevates the entire experience way beyond whatever the budget could ever allow. These movies also just have, that special something. I don't know, a feeling of magic, this feeling of wonder. Like, I don't know how to describe it in any way that makes sense, but even if I wouldn't have watched these movies as a kid, even if I didn't have the bias that I have towards them today, if I saw them right now with no prior knowledge, I would still be blown away. And then we have the prequels, which is, I mean, it's there's some stuff here and there, and
I'll try spinning. That's a good trick.
And then you have the sequels. And I mean, there's these movies, they're not that good. They're not very good at all, actually. And while it's incredibly frustrating that these newer trilogies just didn't meet the mark and just underachieved so badly, they do have their moments. They have ideas that are interesting, or at the very least fun and, enjoyable, even if those ideas aren't executed all that well. However, The Phantom Menace does have one really, really good idea, a really good concept, and it's executed very well. In fact, it's executed so well that it's easily the highlight of the first half of the movie, and one of the only moments in The Phantom Menace where I feel that Star Wars magic is still there. This idea, this concept, is pod racing. I absolutely love the pod racing sequence from Phantom Menace. Everything from the incredibly cool designs of these weird futuristic machines to how these machines sound. Speaking of sound, the sound design in this sequence is out of this fucking world. I mean, don't get me wrong, everything built around the pod race is complete dog shit, and the reasons for having the pod race are complete dog shit, and I don't think it actually benefits the story or the plot or the pacing of the movie whatsoever. But it's fun. It's a fun moment and a fun series of scenes in an otherwise absolutely horrible movie. And of course, with all the Star Wars prequel video games coming out at that time, we got a lot of different takes on pod racing. But my favorite, and the one I remember the most, is the one from the Nintendo 64.
Star Wars Episode 1 Racer on Game Boy Color.
Get into it.
Apparently they ported this over to the Game Boy Color, which is hilarious. I wish I would have played that game growing up. Anyway, I remember Star Wars Episode 1 Racer being a very good game. I played it a ton as a kid. And when I started recording this video, it was on sale on Steam for $2. So for me, that's a no-brainer. So let's just dig this thing up and see if it's still worth playing in 2021. We get that classic LucasArts logo, and we actually get a pre-rendered 3D cutscene to open the game up, which was not on the Nintendo 64, so that's pretty cool. They're also really small. I don't know why this is. I'm assuming it has something to do with the resolution, but I have no idea how to fix it. So I'll just zoom in for you guys. The cutscenes in this game are just a fucking treat. They're so great. They're just so crusty and janky and weird, and the screen is so small when you're actually playing. It just makes it feel like something out of a fever dream. Like, watch this one, watch this one. I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, fucking what? What was that? Who was that? Was that a person? Was that a robot? Was that an animal? What are they doing? Are they waving hi? Are they... what is happening here? Anyway, back to the opening cutscene, which ends like this. I didn't edit any of this. We go from the opening cutscene to transitioning into a bar, watching like a little droid walk out and do some kind of shimmy with dead silence. There's no sound in this scene. I guess they're trying to be avant-garde or something? I have no idea.
It's so dense, every single image has so many things going on.
It's from this weird, dead silent bar that we actually select what races we want to go on and what racers we want to use. And it's here that we start to see just how bad this game is aged in terms of graphics. But hey, we have plenty of different racers to choose from, and you know, they're all your favorite Star Wars characters, like Toy Dampner, Gazgano, Dud Bolt, Bowls Roar. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but I have no fucking idea who any of these people are. It is nice that we have this huge cast of characters to choose from, seeing as all of them drive a little bit differently and they all have their own strengths and weaknesses, so it does mix things up a little bit. After we pick our character, we pick which tournament we want to go into. And if you've ever played Mario Kart or any similar kind of party racing game, you know how this works. Different tournaments on a sliding scale of difficulty. It's pretty standard. The gameplay is also pretty standard. Every track has 3 laps. If you ain't first, you're last. There's no weird abilities or weapons you can use like in other arcade racing games, but there's also not a lot of depth to the gameplay like in simulation racing games of the time. So Star Wars Episode 1 Racer kind of sits in this weird middle ground. There is a really fun boost mechanic where the longer you press the boost button, the higher chance your vehicle has of just exploding, which is pretty fun. If you get any damage, you will also have to repair it mid-race, which causes your pod to slow down, which can have other pods pass you. But on the whole, there's not a lot of complexity to this game. The most complex thing is probably the upgrade system. Anytime you complete a race, you get cash earnings depending on where you placed in that race, and you can spend those earnings on upgrades for your vehicles, and the upgrades are pretty straightforward: better turning, better speed, better acceleration, stuff like that. But what makes it interesting is that for every time you crash in a race, it lowers the durability of these upgrades, meaning that you constantly have to either be repairing the upgrades you have, selling off your upgrades and buying different upgrades, or just don't crash, but that's easier said than done.
They come here, they look around, they no buy. Why nobody buy?
But what's nice about this system is that whatever upgraded parts you buy apply to all drivers in the game. So if you get to a race where someone like Anakin, high speed, high acceleration isn't what you need someone with better turning, you could pick a different driver and all those upgrades that you got for Anakin carry over. It's nice, it adds a layer of flexibility to things. However, there are some drivers that are just flat out better than others, which kinda makes the whole upgrade system slightly redundant, but it was never the star of the show anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. Instead, this game relies on its track design and its AI to keep you invested, and while I'm gonna be real with you, these are some really cool racetracks, and we'll get to that later. The AI, the computers in this game, absolute dog water. I got first place in every single race in this game, and not because I'm really good at the game or because the courses are easy to navigate. More often than not, that's not true. The AI just can't catch up. I don't know how to put it. I mean, I guess you could say that the other drivers are just window dressing, because they never actually challenge you. You barely even interact with them. You're so far ahead of them more often than not. And if you do interact with them, if you bump into them, more often than not, you just explode. And then they just keep driving. They feel like they're not even there. They are very loud, though. So there's a taunt button in this game where you just press it and your character will shout out a taunt, just some random alien gibberish at the other drivers. But all the other drivers can also use taunts against you. So, whenever you drive by another driver, they will just spam this button and just yell all this weird garbage nonsense at you. It's really disorientating. Wait a minute, is that Jake Lloyd? Did they get the actual young Anakin for this game?
You're snaking up the course with that rat!
Yeah, that's definitely Jake Lloyd, and that's definitely what I would say too if I smashed into a wall at 781 miles per hour, and I bounced off that wall, hit another wall, and I was disintegrated to ash upon impact. That's what I would say. I would say, ah, and then, ooh. What the fuck? And it's not really the actor's fault, because all the characters will do this. Your character will crash into a wall and will still be talking long after he's already been exploded into a million pieces. So with the AI being terrible and there being no wacky pickups you can grab during the race, the game leans almost entirely on its racetrack design, which thankfully is actually really good. There's only about half a dozen planets that these races take place on, but the actual tracks are very diverse, some with tons of straight line speed segments, others that look like a goddamn pretzel, but they all play really well. I mean, it's honestly kind of shocking how well these racetracks are designed. There's obstacles to dodge, there's shortcuts to find, and all of these tracks still look visually appealing. There's tracks where you're underwater, and there's that weird spaceship submarine thing from the Phantom Menace flying over your head. One track you're racing by a cliffside, one track you're racing in a volcano, one track you're racing on top of this weird Bespin platform thing. I mean, there's always something to look at with these racetracks, which I really do appreciate. What really impresses me, though, is the sense of speed this game has. I mean, you're going almost 800 miles per hour, and it feels like it. One small mess up, one slow reaction, and suddenly you're in the wall. And while on the earlier levels, the earlier racetracks, you can crash as much as you want, the AI is basically brain dead. On the later racetracks, the AI is still brain dead, but they get a lot faster. So if you crash, there's a good chance your race is basically over. On top of the drivers being more of a threat in the later racetracks, the later racetracks themselves are absolutely bonkers. The late game tracks are incredibly fast-paced, very difficult to navigate, and if you don't know the shortcuts on some of these tracks, you'll just lose like 5 or 6 places in the middle of the race, through no fault of your own, but just if you see an AI take a shortcut, you just have to follow them, because otherwise you're just gonna lose. Even after you max out all of your upgrades and unlock some of the later drivers like Sebulba, you'll still need to know the layout of most of these tracks in order to succeed, which is nice, you know? I feel like I could jump onto any Mario Kart map and do well, whereas with Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, you kind of need to know what you're doing if you want to succeed, which is respectable for a game like this. The one funny thing is that Sebulba, the main villain of the Phantom Menace pod racing sequence, is the second to last unlockable driver you get. He's not the last person to unlock. The last driver you unlock is Ben Quadraneros. Why? Why is Sebulba not the final unlockable character? Why is this guy who blows up before the race even starts in the movie the final unlockable character? And even worse, why are his stats so good? Why is Ben Quadranero so good? This game is only going to take you probably 2 or 3 hours to beat. I ended up spending 7 or 8 hours on it, just having fun beating my best times on some of these racetracks, and I think the main takeaway from digging up this game is just, I feel like there's a lot of missed potential with the pod racing from Star Wars. I feel like there could have been more games, we could have seen this in maybe some other TV shows or even another movie. It's such a fun idea. It's not an original one. I mean, we've had people racing in futuristic cars in science fiction movies going back to Akira, so it's not something that's revolutionary, but it's unique, and it's interesting, and it's engaging, and it's simple, and it's fun, and it lends itself naturally to video games, with the 3-lap structure, with the crazy track layouts, with the crashes and the explosions. It's stunning that there hasn't been more pod racing games, and you look at the racing game genre now and where it's at. I mean, there's no F-Zero. Mario Kart is basically the only real party arcade racing game worth anything. There's a lot of open space, a lot of free real estate for a game to just step in and kind of establish its dominance over the racing genre. And I get it. I mean, the genre's not super popular right now, but I also feel like there hasn't been a great, truly transcendent racing game in a very, very long time, and I don't know, call me crazy, but I feel like a pod racing game could fit that description.